Study Basers! I'm going to introduce you to my imaginary string technique. I know that sounds weird. It's really just a way to visualize note patterns on the fretboard. And it's really just a simple mental trick, but it's always kind of an aha moment for students when they're trying to learn all of these different shapes and relationships on the fretboard. First, I want to point out, a lot of learning is about absorbing something that's completely new to you, so something that you've never seen before. But then a lot of other learning is just about seeing something that you already know in some new way. And it's this second kind of learning that really yields a lot of big results really quickly. And that's what this is. So I'm going to show you how to take scale and arpeggio shapes that you already know to find some common useful shapes that you might not know. Here's the first major triad shape that most people learn: root, third, fifth octave. What students sometimes fail to see is that this shape is also the notes of a major triad. But if you imagine a string below your lowest string, then you can immediately see how it's the same familiar shape. You just can't access that low note. Let's look at another one. Here's the dominant seventh shape that you might have already learned. And here's another common dominant seventh shape that is just missing that low root note. So again, imagine a string below, and it's easy to see the shape that you're already familiar with. This shape shows up in a lot of bass parts. So if you've ever played Aerosmith's Sweet Emotion, that big riff on D7 in between the verses is straight out of this shape. Or if you've ever played Cold Sweat by James Brown, it's part of that bass line. Now, you can use this imaginary string technique for any pattern or shape that you know. And it doesn't matter how many strings your bass has. So if you have 5 strings, you imagine a 6th string. If you have 6 strings, then you imagine a 7th. So it doesn't matter. Now let's try it with a scale. So here's the major scale that everyone first learns. And here's a partial major scale, and you can see that it's missing the bottom 2 notes, which fall on the imaginary string. So again, you can see how it's the same shape, just incomplete. So hopefully this little mental visualization trick helps you find some shapes that were previously hidden from you. So it's very important to learn to find chord tones and scale tones, both above and below a given root note. So if you only know where to find notes above, well, then some root notes like D or E flat might force you too high up on the fretboard. And oftentimes, as bass players, we want lower notes. Also, one way to explore all of these different shapes for scales and chords on the fretboard is go to the fretboard printer in the tools section of studybass.com, and there you can look up almost all common chords and scales and see them on the entirety of the fretboard.